Resume the recording. All right, welcome to this keynote session number one with Brian Mackey. So we can see your screen. I'll let you going.
Well, cool. So, gonna do a little shameless plug before we get in. So, those of you who don't know, I do see a couple names here of people who do join. I do a monthly webcast called Revit Radio. It's the first Tuesday of every month. It's literally where you guys ask questions, and myself and Melissa Thiesens currently is the one who's been with me for the last couple of years, answer those questions. So there is no show. We don't have anything ever pre-planned. We just show up and answer questions. So I have a lot of clients who show up and just, every once a month, they'll just be like, okay, cool. I'm going to save all my questions for that month and we'll get into it. But I have been doing that since I believe it was about Revit 2000, or it was about 2006 or seven when we started doing Revit Radio. So I've been doing it for quite a while. One of the things I just thoroughly enjoy. So again, cheap way to get all your questions asked along the way. The other thing here is ask questions as we're going along. Don't wait till the end. I'm not one of those people who are like, hey, let's wait till the end of the presentation to ask those questions. As we're getting in there, we're going through doing it. Type that question in so we can see what's going on, and we'll go ahead and answer those as we go through, because I hate to get to the end and then have to backtrack. So as Nick said, this is all about noting. I did change the top just to say noting, because is it keynotes? Is it tags? Is it text? What are we going to do here? So I think a lot of this, and Nick, feel free to jump in with with your opinions too. But when we get into this and we start talking about it, I think that's it for my PowerPoints anyway. But I think what you're saying, is it keynoting? Is it text? Is it tags? It depends on what we're talking about, right? So everybody's probably seen my detailing presentation by now. If you haven't, I know I've done it on one of the other BIM peer websites. I've done it at AU, built BIM workshops. I've been, like I said, presenting the detailing for, I don't know, probably 2 decades now. But I always like to talk about this and just kind of showcase some of the differences between tagging in Revit versus obviously doing text, which everybody knows about, and then potentially keynoting, the positives and the negatives for both of those. So for me, I'm a big fan. I don't know about you, Nick, but I'm a big fan. If we're talking about like detailing and doing things like this, I like using tagging instead. So just as kind of an example, if I select everything on here and I just go to the filter, you'll see there's no lines, there's no pieces of text in here. It's just all coming in as detail items or detail item tags, right? The reason why I like the tagging scenario is you have a little bit more flexibility with tags than you potentially might have with doing keynoting. So if we come in here and we just kind of look at something, right? If I grab this tag and we look at the tag, I have lots of different types of tags inside of here. And those just meaning, what am I tagging? Am I tagging the type comments along with the comments? Just the type comments, the comments? Do I have specific tags looking at some shared parameters potentially? What am I doing with the tags that I'm looking for? So this particular tag is going to be grabbing like type. So if I go edit this family, you're going to see I have type comments here. Oh, sorry, I thought I heard something pop up there. So you'll see I have type comments here when I'm looking at this. And if somebody were to come in and say, holy crap, I wanted a period after gypsum board, I can change that here in the type properties. And of course, anywhere I've tagged that in this project, it's going to update. But I also know there's going to be times where somebody's going to be like, cool, let me copy this. Let me go from here to here. And now I didn't want to have to tag gypsum board twice. I might just want to go in and add something like as a comment to say, cool, I just wanted to say 2 layers. Right, so now I can see, oh, there's my gypsum board. It said 2 layers. I didn't have to go through and tag each one of those pieces of gypsum board as we were looking at it. So kind of for me, the reason why I like the tagging is it maintains consistency, but it still has the flexibility of giving you customization.
Yeah, and
Now, where that becomes different is if you're keynoting. Go ahead.
yeah, I was wondering. Yeah, so gonna talk about the difference with keynoting. Someone might ask, what if you want consistent standard among the different kind of projects? Let's say you have multiple linked files and you want to affect the notes in several projects at once. Could keynotes be an advantage in this case?
Yeah, they could be. And again, that is kind of one of the downsides of tagging here is you also leave it up to people on your project to decide what they want to put in there. Right? So if somebody wanted to come here and call this wall board, somebody could go in and be like, no, 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 I want to just change this to be wall board, which I hate, but it's an old school term. Now it's going to say, oh, this is just 5/8 wallboard, right? So you have that capability or the flexibility of this. Yes, if I did change this component in this project, but I'm using this component in multiple projects, I've now lost the capability of having that consistency between maybe multiple buildings in the same project, or at least multiple files. So that is one of the downsides of looking at it here, and you do have that freedom, right? The other advantage, though, you do have is if you're not doing that, so you can see like here, my little seismic tie here, or my little anchor, my brick anchor here, has a tick box to turn the seismic on. So if I want to turn that on and off, I can just untick it, and that's just going to change the graphics, but it's also over here notating, changing the notations as well. So just by ticking that button, it's going to add text. There would be no way to do something like that within keynoting. Even within keynoting, if I tagged something on or off, I wouldn't even be able to change the keynote value. It would just say masonry anchor veneer. And if I wanted to have one with a seismic tie or not, I would have to have this as a type property and have two different anchors, one with says seismic and one that says no seismic, right? So you can gain flexibility with tags by adding different information. The way I've done that is in that family, when I tick seismic, I also do have two custom shared parameters. One here is called prefix and the other one's called suffix. And I have a formula in the family that says if that's ticked, add these words. So these words are locked down. If you're like, I want it uppercase, you would have to go edit the family. You'd have to, oops, not edit the type. You'd have to go edit the family. You'd have to go into the formula and you would have to say, cool, I want this all to be uppercase. So I could say caps locks with seismic tie. Hopefully I spelt that all right and didn't fat finger it. Right? Say okay, load that into the project, my details file, overwrite it, and now it's uppercase. So that can be a downside when you start getting into it as well, depending on what you're looking at when you get into that, how that's going to be set up. But you do have that capability and that flexibility to do that.
And someone is asking in the chat, Patrick, if that's a standard text family. So that's a tag family. Can you show us what it looks like inside of the that tag family? It's a
Yep,
detail
yep.
item tag.
Yeah, it's a detail item tag, and you'll see that I've got a whole bunch of visibility parameters in here. So if I edit this family, it's going to look crazy. I do love that whenever Autodesk decided to add the preview visibility, oh my God, this was nice. I don't know if you've ever had tags like this and you were old
Yeah.
school Revit, you're just like hunting and pecking. Is that the one I want? And you're looking to see, no, that wasn't the one I want. So you're hiding it with your sunglasses and you're spending 15 minutes hunting and pecking. Now we can just say, cool, show me the preview visibility, and whatever you have up here, it's going to be looking at. So like I said, I've got this one here. It's saying, hey, this is using type comments and comments. So if I edit this label, it's just saying, cool, use my prefix and suffix. Those are in all of my families. But then I say, hey, let's look at the type comments and the comments. So prefix and suffix are shared parameters, but type comments and comments are just out of the box values.
Yeah, I have kind of a simplified version that kind of looks like this. I think I only have prefix, suffix, and the main description. But it's nice to have all these options.
Yeah, and if I went to one that was like looking to my rebar, because I use the same thing, this is using all shared parameters with the exception of comments. So it's using a shared parameter called quantity, size, and then on my suffix is still the same shared parameter, and then I have comments as well. So it's using all of those values. So it's just a whole bunch of labels on top of each other. Again, if I get out of the preview visibility, whole bunch of labels on top of each other, just selecting what you wanted to be selecting on. So again, detail item tag. So it truly is looking to that object, right? And we're talking detail items right now. We'll get into like 3D model geometry and stuff like that too, because basically it could be the same thing as long as you're looking at components and not layers of components like a wall. But
And so one of the downside of that is like compared to with text, it's a bit more difficult to manage the positioning and the justification of the text. So you have a checkbox for right side or left side, right?
I did two separate families. So I actually have one that's a left
Separate families.
justified family and then
Uh-huh.
one that's a right. I was doing that and I had everything on top of each other and it was just getting so
Just too
crazy. I'm like,
much.
no.
Yeah.
And 90% of my clients do it this way, so I haven't
Uh-huh.
worried about it too terrible much. Like if you're one that has both, have that tag and
Oh,
I
you
would just
mean your notes are always on the right side.
Yep. Yep. My notes are
Oh,
always on the
that's
right
interesting.
side.
And I never thought about that.
Yeah, so this is like my detail guide box, which again, you guys can go back to the detailing one, and that's saying, hey, notes are always over here, graphics are always over here.
So, someone in the chat, Drayton, I think, can you please share your previous links for creating tags and keynotes? So, if you type Brain McKee on YouTube, details, I think
Just say just
there's
say
another Desk
detailing and
University, and
yeah, just say detailing in Revit, and you'll find like 13 different presentations on it.
yeah, like we did one back in 2021. That was almost 5 years ago. That's all it's on YouTube. So where Brian explains the principles of detailing, but now we're gonna dig deeper on like the differences between keynoting and things beyond detailing.
Yeah, yeah. So that's, again, regardless if you're doing detailing or keynoting, you're going to see I'm not doing text, right? Now, I will say some of my clients are like, no, 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 especially structural engineers, like, no, no, I like doing a novel. I like saying this is an anchor, this is a, 2x6 wall with 16-inch on center studs and anchors every 4 feet, and they just do a novel of text. Great. If that's what you're looking for, go to town. Part of the reason why I like either keynoting or tagging is the capability that with either of those, you can actually go schedule it and you can see exactly what you're seeing, right? So if you're just doing text, there's no way in Revit out of the box to go in and say, cool, I want a schedule of every single piece of text I put inside of here, right? So you have no idea what verbiage people are putting in anywhere. But if you're doing it with a tag and or keynotes, you're going to see every single one of those elements, every way that's been worded, as well as, hey, if they're doing additional properties, I can start to see those additional properties.
And I'm curious in the chat, people should if you can type those of you still using text, but no shaming, or if some of you have
No, no.
graduated to using tags. I often see kind of a mix of both. Like some people
Yeah.
try to do tags, but there's still kind of some lines and text in there. I mean, better than nothing. And yes, although if you're using tags, you need everything needs to be a detail item, right? So you cannot use lines. You cannot tag a line.
Yeah, exactly. So even in that scenario, like these things that look like lines, this is not a line. This is still a family. That's just a line-based family. So I can't do curves. So if you're trying to be like, ooh, I wanted to show this being curved, I don't have, but it's a family that has multiple different types of objects in that family, right? So I don't ever draw lines. And again, for me, or filled regions, although technically you can tag filled regions, for me, all of the stuffs are going to be detail components or in the model world, modeled objects.
So it's interesting to see in the chat what people are saying. Some say definitely still use tags, but can see using this. Someone says I've been using multi-category tags. Yeah, that's something we should talk about as well. One of our office use text, the rest of us use tags. Trying to adopt tag, but it's hard to get the full firm adoption. That's also something sometimes I see resistance. You show the whole system. It kind of works for some users, but you always end up some kind of a renegade users and then using text anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're always going to have that, but try to set the standards.
Yeah.
So jumping in, doing basically the same thing, looking at keynoting, right? So keynoting is still a tag, it's just a different type of tag in Revit. The downside is when you look at keynotes, is you are limited to the keynote value and the keynote text. That is it. Right. So if I wanted to do before and have something here that says, oh, with seismic tie, that I can just grab this and tick, that's not going to do anything for this tag. Unfortunately, we can't customize that pretty much at all inside of Revit. So that's the reason why I don't like this. The advantage of, as Nick said earlier, if I want this to say masonry anchor between 5 different Revit files in the same project, I can point this all to that same external TXT file, right? So the thing that when we start looking at keynoting is keynotes have a setting and you can point each project to use a keynote file, right? So if I have 5 different buildings, I can point those 5 buildings to the same TXT file. Therefore, if I go edit that TXT file, I can have it update in all 5 buildings. So that is kind of one of the advantages of doing it. But when I edit a keynote tag, there's nothing custom you can do to a label. When you grab a label, you can do keynote value and keynote text. You can't add any custom shared parameters. That's it. Those 2 values, that's what you get. So, like I was saying a minute ago, is when we're in there looking at this, if you're like, cool, I wanted one to say with seismic tie and one without, I would have to edit this family, make seismic a type property. And then in that type property, when I ticked it on, I would have to point to a different keynote value. So I'd have to have one that's masonry anchor and another one that's masonry anchor with, excuse me, with seismic tie. So all those little nuances that you would want to do, you would have to go through and mimic that. Or I see a lot of firms do this, unfortunately. They then go put a piece of text next to this and be like, okay, cool. I want to say with, probably should have chose the right text type, seismic tie. I probably spelled that wrong with fat
Yeah, and
fingers.
that kind of defeats the purpose of having some automated note system by adding manual text like
Yeah,
that, right?
exactly. But I see this quite often for firms who are actually going to go through and do this, or like the gypsum board scenario. They'll say 5/8 gypsum board, then they'll put 2 layers or 3 layers. And then the worst part is somebody comes in here and is like, ooh, I need to move this down graphically because that seismic tie is there. I need to move it here. Cool. And now I have, oh, this did not move with it because I have it pinned. Let me unpin it. Let me unpin that. So let me take this, move this down, right? Hit move. Let's just say I'm moving it from here down to here, right? I would be a little bit more specific on this. Nudge it down, and cool, I've got a masonry anchor, and up here now I have floating text,
Yeah, no,
right?
that would drive me crazy.
Yes.
Like if like it's I would almost say just do tax if you're gonna do that. So, like, do you see a lot of firms only using the number? Because I could see if you only have the number, well, the full description could be in a legend somewhere. Is that something that I do see some firm locally that just have
Yep.
some sort of number for the details?
It depends. I see more firms are using just the numbers when they're like on a floor plan or something. But when they're in the details, I think it seems kind of weird to then have a schedule that's 6 inches away saying this is what you're using. But so I don't see it that common. But yes, I have had clients who just like, okay, cool. Let me duplicate this one and say value only, say
Hmm.
number only, right? And I can say, cool, just give me the number. And then I can duplicate and say both, right? And now I've got both. So I can set it up either way. So that's my both one. And now I've got a number only. So yeah, you can set that up and we're going to get into creating schedules for this stuff, but we'll go in, you could have a schedule on the sheet that then said, hey, here's all the things you have and here's what those notes are.
Yeah, so I think you've hit some of the limitations that I also find pretty annoying with Keynote. The first being that there's only kind of a number and a text value. You cannot add more, like prefix, suffix, and so on. And also, there's a single Keynote file per Revit project, right?
Correct.
So that, okay, maybe you have your keynotes for details, but what about the keynotes for like plan view legends? So I've seen firms try to combine everything in some sort of super keynote file, but it gets pretty messy.
And actually, I am going to cover that when we start talking
Okay.
about like plan notes.
Okay.
So yes, but yeah, no, that it can be that way. And if your firm is using Keynotes, I recommend somebody Revolution Design Keynote Manager is a fairly inexpensive tool that I think if you're doing keynoting, this is a tool you should use. So I need to tell Steve I'm plugging his tool, but this is a fairly inexpensive program. I think I have a firm who just bought it. It was like a couple $1,000s for an enterprise license, and they have like 100 users
But what's
because
the name
this
again? The Keynote Revolution.
Keynote Manager from
Okay.
revolutiondesign.biz. Yeah, I know there's going to be some people that are going, yeah, I love the Keynote Manager. Because if you're keynoting, this thing here is going to take you right to your keynote. Okay, I got to fix this tab. It's driving me crazy. It's going to take you to that keynote file, and it's going to show you all the keynotes in that file. If
Hmm.
you keynote something and don't put a view on a sheet, it's even going to tell you, hey, this has been used on a tag, but it's not actually on a sheet somewhere. There's even a way to like, I forget because I don't use this tool that often, but there's a way to come in here and say, okay, I don't even want to see, I want to see these grayed out or whatever to see which ones are being used, which ones are not being used. So it's got this tool. But the biggest thing about this tool is if you go into the settings, and I got to remember where this is, right here, the save mode actually has instant save. So what that means is if I go edit the Keynote file, it's going to open it up, it's going to edit it, it's going to save it, it's going to close the Keynote file. So
Yeah.
you can have multiple people editing that TXT file because it's not technically at the biggest things. And I have people say they hate this tool because if somebody goes into this, it locks down the file. Well, that's because you're in manual save. So you need to make sure you're in instant save, not manual save.
And how do you feel about the Pyrivit Keynote Manager, which a lot of people use because it's free and everyone has Pyrivit nowadays?
It does it a completely different way, and it's got to convert it from a TXT file. I think it's a JSON file. It's either JSON file or an XML, I forget. But it creates it and mimics it into a different file type, and that's how it does it. So it does become a little bit more cumbersome because if we're looking at this one, and I just come down because I copied this into the folder. Let me pull my, come on, pull down. It actually Keynote Manager just creates a folder that's it's using for the cache data, right? But it's still pointing to this TXT file. So a lot of people more understand, cool, here's the TXT file I'm going to be using. This is what I go through and use.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that
It's
that
it's a different file.
yeah, so it will still point to yeah, and PyRabbit creates a whole
Yeah, the
folder and it breaks
Pyrivit
it
one.
down
Yeah.
into yeah. So Keynote Manager still looks to the TXT, but it uses this XML and this folder to like temporarily cache and parse the data.
Hmm.
The other thing, and I have never used it, the Keynote Manager also has a cloud version. So if you're a company working on ACC and you got people in multiple offices or even worse, multiple companies working in the same Revit file, you can actually use the cloud version and it'll do the same thing in his cloud. So it works really well too.
Yeah, though we have a few questions about that. Let's check it out. Yeah, a lot of people are thinking you're using the Pyrivit one, although it's not as good as Revolution Design because everyone has Pyrivit. Derek is asking, should and can the Keynote file be coordinated with a details library and specs?
It can and should. So usually when people are thinking, again, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but usually when people are thinking about this, they're thinking like, at least in the United States, master format CSI divisions. So they're basically setting it up off of master format. You will see when I get later into like plan note, sheet notes, I'm not doing that at all. So that part of it's not coordinated in any way, but it doesn't have to be. In the US, people are setting this up, like I said, to master spec. I have seen people basically use keynoting for like ISO at it. It is again limited because you have, if I'm looking at it in the Keynote Manager, you have like parent folders, not folders. You have so you can go like 3 or 4 levels deep for this. And if you need to go something a little bit more, potentially like I don't know, I don't do ISO, but if ISO needed to go a little bit deeper, I'm sure you could set it up for something like that too.
Okay. I think that the next session next week we're gonna dig deeper. At least that was the plan, like on a keynote specifically, some of the feature. And this week we're gonna go bust all the differences between all these systems. Let's see other questions. Amy is asking, our list of Keynote files with Revolution Design has become unmanageable. When we intend to continue using their Keynote Manager, we need a new solution for file storage. Do you have any recommendation for a more organizing hosting alternative?
Huh. Oh, and the Key Revolution Designs file hosting service,
I would guess so.
Amy, or are you talking like you're on ACC? If
Can
you're
you
talking
can
about
you hear me?
Yeah. Hey, Amy.
Okay, awesome. So we use Keynote Manager and absolutely love it. I love the search feature up at the top. It makes things easy and everything's super organized. We also use their cloud service for hosting the Keynote files, but the problem is there's no organization to it. It's just one long running list. And we've been using this for like 5+ years. So we just have massive amounts of Keynote files in this list. And
oh
I want to move the Keynote file. Like I tried putting it in ACC, but it was locking it to individual users.
ah, yeah, it doesn't work in ACC. I don't know, but I would actually shoot Steve is the guy who runs it, but I would shoot the support for Keynote Manager. Steve is very responsive and maybe he has an
Okay.
input for you on that.
Okay, awesome. I will do that. Thank you.
Love this because
Uh,
then it starts showing you keynotes if you're doing user keynotes and not element keynotes. But again, we'll get into that later. Still trying to just edit the damn TXT file manually. Shoot yourself in the head because that's crazy. I just can't imagine anybody doing that and go look at it because
yeah,
hello,
you can use Excel as
we
well,
got
right? I did use the keynotes with Excel.
or a lot of people will save it out as a CSV and then rename this year. But now you're trying to then modify this, and you've got to understand is 0300, and then these ones go under the 03, and it's not because of this, it's because of the values over here.
Hmm.
So you put this value, say, hey, I'm a sub parent of this. This value then says, cool, I'm a sub parent, sub value of 10. And then the 00 means, hey, I'm my own value. So it becomes real pain in the butt trying to look at this TXT file. You can, like I said, save it as a CSV, edit it there, overwrite the TXT file. Yeah, it's just not worth your time for the minimal cost that the Revolution Design tool is or the Pi Revit tool. Use it because it will save you hundreds of hours rather than dealing with this crap.
All right.
So,
That's for keynote management. I do have a question for you. What do you think about multi-category tags versus using specific tags like detail item and so on?
uh,
But
category
Brian,
tag.
I don't know if it's the same for everyone else. Like your internet's slightly cutting, so we lose kind of chunks of a couple seconds here and there.
Okay, sorry. I will have to look at that because my speeds are 900 down and 200 up, so I don't know what's going on. I did run a test a minute ago.
Oh yeah. I don't know if it's just me.
No,
And
you're cutting out for me too, so I'm assuming it's
oh, okay.
probably me. Yeah, it's breaking up for Liliana too.
You're
Yeah,
not
so it
breaking
must
up.
be. I don't know. I did reboot my computer before this happened too. I don't know. Maybe I'll reboot my next week. I'll
That's the joy of
rewrite.
online sessions.
Me on that. Multi-category tags originally in Revit, it wouldn't grab all of the categories, so I just got in the habit of not using them. I have been using them a little bit more, and on something where you're like, hey, I'm always going to be tagging the type comments in the comments. That's absolutely something that you could have done with the multi-category tag. My problem is I'm often looking specifically for certain values to certain elements. So if you're talking like, hey, we're always just going to tag the type comments or the type mark on every single element, that's cool. You could use a multi-category tag. The other reason why I don't use it is a lot of times people have different symbols for the different tag types. Hey, my door tag is an octagon, my window tag is a hexagon, whatever it's going to be. So I've been more specific into tag the doors, tag this. However, I do have some clients where every tag just has a box around it. So yes, in their project, I'm like, well, let's just make it multi-category because if you're always tagging the type mark and it's always a box, you should just grab multi-category tag and go to town.
All right. So far we've covered tags and keynotes. Can you tell us your thoughts about symbols? So for those, or maybe explain for people who don't know what the symbols noting technique is.
Man, see, I'm losing my internet there. I missed what you said. I don't know what is going on my internet.
Oh yeah, I was saying, can you explain the difference between symbols, tag, and keynotes?
Symbols. Um, so when this is something I don't agree with the dumb symbol, and a lot of people will because they just want to put a symbol down that will actually they can type in a text value. Um, I think I been over here to talk about that a little bit. So a lot like, oh, rather than tag a grid line or tag something else component, I want it to be generic. As I just
Brian,
cut the camera off just to see. So this could be like a grid, right? So this is a symbol in a case for detail where I can just come in and change the value I'm going to want to see here, right? So technically it's a symbol nested into a detail component, but I could go through and say, cool, now I've got that. I can set it up. And in certain cases like this, that's going to be great. Where I see a lot of people try do, oh, I just want to do a symbol for or something like that. I disagree with that personally. I don't like to do that because I'd rather tag intelligent live data. Are we there?
Yeah, it's still glitching a bit. I wonder if you maybe you should try to rejoin the session. What do you think? It's kind of cutting intermittently. Just gonna pause it. Record again. All right, we're back with hopefully fixed the technical issues. So we were talking about differences between symbols, tags, and keynotes.
All righty. So yeah, so I don't have a lot of those dumb symbols. I do have a couple, and we're going to talk about that when we start getting into like sheet notes or actually even just generating tables. Yeah, but that's one of the things to me. So I do know there's times and locations, times and places for symbols. We're talking about keynoting, like plan notes, etc., things like that. That's where it's going to become more of a big deal of, hey, let's talk about those. A little bit to floor
Uh, th
plan here, right?
yeah, I think you're still cutting, Brian.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I literally ran internet speed test while we were off. I have everything turned off that I can potentially turn off. I think I can close that. Yeah, I can't close that.
Pause. All right, we're back. Brian had some technical difficulties, but we're adapting. And someone asked to show the difference, to explain what it is a symbol. That's going to be the first question. So, all of you, if you're watching this, it means you have access to everything on BIMPure, including our Pro template. And on the Pro template, there is in the schedules over here, you can see different notes. And you can see this is a note system that is using symbols. So if I click to highlight on the model, you can see there's a note right here. So this is a simple symbol family. It's also in the generic annotation category. So if I open this, it's simply a square with a number. And these are parameters made directly inside of the family. So it's not a tag, it's not a keynote. There are pros and cons to this technique. As Brian said, the problem, they're not linked to actual Revit element. It's basically a sophisticated way of doing text. So if I am back here, the way to place these elements, I'm going to go to symbol over here. I have my plan notes. I click here somewhere, and then I can enter a number. I can enter a text description. So for example, demolish this window. Then I can add a leader to point to the element I want. Then I can, this is a custom family, but the way it's set up, I can have a specific view type, for example, plan view. And now if I go to the floor plan notes, it's going to appear here in this note. And what's nice, you can also highlight in the model, it's going to show this. So if you're still doing text notes, like dumb text note, this is a great improvement over that. However, the issue with that, it's an issue, it's both a pro and a con at the same time. It's not linked to specific elements. So that means if I delete the window, the note is still there, which is both good and bad. Good in the sense that you can really place notes anywhere you want. It's pretty fast. It doesn't matter what information is inside of this wall, I can point to it. And also I can point anywhere, right? Because with keynotes, you need to point to very specific places. What's nice about this, I can point in the void and I don't have to worry that I'm going to delete an element by mistake and the note is going to disappear. So that's what's nice about it. But then there are the cons of it that they're not really linked and you cannot have the same note system used in different projects. So personally, I like the system for simple plan views annotation. I think it works well for it. I would not use this for details. I would use what Brian showcased using detail item tags or potentially keynotes. But I'm curious to see what Brian thinks about using the symbol system for a plan view. I think he doesn't like it.
No, I do the
Yeah.
same thing as
Oh,
you.
you're
I'm
there.
here.
There you are.
You're cutting in and out, so my issue's not fixed.
Uh-huh.
Um, the difference for me when I do symbols than that is I actually do those as type properties, not instance, because I
Okay.
hate it when somebody says, "Hey, this is number three," and then they change the text, and I have five number threes with different text.
Mhm. Yeah, you could do them as yeah, a way to deal with this is that when you do the scheduling, you sort by note number and note text,
Yep,
which is nice if you have multiple the same number multiple times, they will still show as different rows, which allows user to quickly fix it.
yep, agreed. But so for me, I always make those a type property. So you're pulling one, two, three, four, five, and
Yeah.
that's the only difference. And most of my clients are like, no, 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 or about half of them. It's a 50-50 split. Some people are like, yes, I absolutely like that. Some people are like, no, 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 I can't stand that.
Yeah, and so what do you think about symbols like for plan notes? You still prefer to use tags?
No, so in a case like plan notes, I either do it with symbols or actually keynoting.
Hmm.
And you had brought it up, and hopefully I'll have this fixed by we do the session next week. Um, when you talk about that, so my Keynote file will have the same scenario, but my Keynote file will get into 100s, 200s, 300s for those notes rather than getting into, division specs or something like that. And again, it's six one way, half dozen the other. The reason why I used to prefer Keynotes over this is if you go back to your schedule, the other nice thing about schedules now is since Revit 25 is in your filtering, you can say filter by sheet.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. So,
So
so this
yeah,
this thing right here.
that was one of the big ones for me that keynoting had the advantage over
Uh-huh.
symbols on is because prior to them adding that to every schedule, I only wanted notes that pertain to that view
So do we
or
have
that
the
sheet.
notes over here? As you can see, one of them is not showing up because we activated filter by sheet. So if a specific node is not showing in this view, uh, it won't show up in the schedule. So personally, I think symbols are good for this kind of simple plan views annotation, but I wouldn't use them for detailing
No.
or thing more custom. So one of the downsides to me of keynotes is you have it's a benefit and a downside. Like I said earlier, you have to point to a specific object, right? So how do you deal with that?
So usually there's something there. I actually had one client, they had a detail component family they would put in that they
Hmm.
called invisible circle, and they
Yeah,
would point to the invisible circle, which I thought was horrible because
yeah,
when
I
somebody
hate that.
deleted the
Yeah,
invisible
yeah,
circle, then all the they literally would do one. So when they did their detailing, they put an invisible circle, they would do element keynotes, or excuse me, user keynotes,
yeah.
point to that circle, and if somebody went in and deleted that circle, all of the notes went away.
Yeah, that drives me crazy. I saw that a few times and I don't like it. It's I don't know. It makes me worried.
But even in that case, when you're saying you're pointing to a void, there's usually a floor or something there you can
Yeah.
point to.
Yeah,
But you
probably
can
so.
also
Uh-huh.
just grab a keynote, make it a user keynote, point to something, make sure the end is a free end, and you can move the arrow wherever you want. So it's six one way, half a dozen the other. Either one of those, if you're using keynote, you're still doing element keynote, or excuse me,
Mhm.
user keynote, which means you're just pointing it to something arbitrary anyway, and it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, so in this case, I guess we're gonna talk maybe next session about the different pros and cons of all different techniques, but you'd use a user keynote and make sure that this is active so you can select the face of the floor and do something like this. And this allows you, oh, I don't have a keynote file, but you can use any node in the file. It's
Yeah,
just that if someone deletes or hides the floor, the node's gonna go away with it.
yeah. Yep, that's the only downside if somebody then does hide that element because you did point to that element, they all go away. So, like I said, when you're doing notes like this, to me, it's six one way. I have the clients who are keynoting like in a detail, they will do the keynoting for their sheet notes like this. I call them keyed notations.
Key notations.
They'll start using that scenario because hey, we've already got a keynote file, and those are the firms that usually want to lock it down to
Uh-huh.
where this says is something specific, and I don't want everyday users to be able to change that.
Yeah, yeah. What about tagging for like views, like plan views and so on? Is this something that you use?
No, Because
No?
90% of the time when you're doing something like this, it's like, oh, this, if I'm like talking about materials, and this is where I do vary from some people, like some people will be like, oh, I want to tag the material with this little round bubble looking tag. And they're like, hey, I want to
Hmm.
tag the material saying this is brick in the elevation, stucco siding, whatever. That's absolutely, in my mind, a keynote or a material tag because you're
Yep.
going live to the data.
Yeah, yeah.
Usually, when I'm seeing notes like this, it's exactly what you have. It says demolish this window, this existing to remain, etc.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and by the way, for those wondering, this is a text visibly toggle that is typically almost always turned off, but I sometimes users like to type it directly in the plan and then they can turn it off afterwards. But it's the same data that's going to show up in the notes over here.
Huh. So yeah, absolutely, that's where I do use a symbol. I also avoid trying to use symbols when people are like, oh, I want to fake in a section cut or something. I also see people using symbols for those.
Yeah, like no, whenever it's kind of a fake something, like if I mean, I guess for sections is not that big of a deal, but whenever like using fake tags, I'm not a big fan of these. But I guess for simple plan views, it can work.
Yeah,
Let's have a look at the questions.
hasn't been any too much when you've been um hasn't been too much when you were talking. I've been watching.
Yeah, yeah, you haven't gone too long. Someone was asking to show the tutorial for the detail tags. I think I'll record something separately to show it
Yeah.
because it could be a good 15 minutes.
Well,
Let's see. Yeah.
I until I opened up Revit. So I have a feeling I'm having a Zoom slash. You were fine. I opened up Revit, then you've been cutting in and out for me. So I know
Yeah.
it's me doing Zoom and Revit, which really sucks when you're trying to present Revit.
Yeah.
And
But
then Milo did ask, is there any difference between material tagging? So keynote a material as well. You're getting in there to do the keynote and you can keynote a material. So if your materials have keynote values, that's absolutely a third level of way you can get into it.
let's see someone. All right, maybe I can quickly show the detail item tags since people are asking. I wonder if I have any detail element in this one. Yeah, this one. So the idea is I have a few detail elements in there. And if I want to create a tag, I'll do the simple version that uses the comments. So I'm going to create, and you can tell me, Brian, if I'm doing something wrong. Uh, I'm going to go to annotations, select. So you can see in here, I think there's no detail item tag, but that's fine because I'm going to start with the generic tag and immediately go to the yellow folder icon and switch to using a detail item tag right here. And then immediately I can click here to create a label and I'm going to use the comments field. So I'm using a built-in parameter, but you could also create custom shared parameter. Like for the prefix and suffix, you need to create custom shared parameter and assign them directly in the project as well. But you can also use some of these built-ins. I guess you could also have type comments. Like let's just start with comments for now, so you get the idea. And I would make sure to do the horizontal line, set this to left and move something like this. And yeah, that's it basically. So I'll just load it back into this project. I'm going to go to a view where we have some detail item elements. So that was this one. And then I can tag them. So you can see now, if I try to tag this, let me copy it, this plywood element. It's showing up as a question mark, but the thing is that this is currently empty. So I can type whatever description I want, something like that, and it's going to show up. And if I uh, copy this element, let's Let's tag it once again. So right now we're using an instance parameter, but something that you could do is to change using a type parameter instead, which will ensure that you can modify the value for all elements at once. So I'm switching to type comments. I'm just going to make the text box longer. Currently, there's a question mark, but check this out. So if I type plywood along with the value, it's going to work. And the nice thing about it is if I edit the properties of this plywood and change the thickness or something, it changes for all of them. So how many of you have like gypsum, half of an inch gypsum, or gypsum board, like slightly different text everywhere along the details? So this allows you to have consistent description all around your projects.
Well, I think the other thing that I do, Nick, too, is not even with just detail item tags. Like I noticed back in one of your like floor plan legends, you
Yeah.
had notes, you had text next to what the family is. At least that's what it looked like. Um, like for me, when I'm in there, I create a tag that I use also in like my legend views or my whatever, so I can tag those objects with the actual name. So I want to
Uh-huh.
get the name, the type mark, etc. And I think that's one of the big things about tags is have tags you're going to use for production for construction documents, but then also have tags for you to work.
Yeah, yeah.
Like so
So
if you go into your like template standards, I think in that view. So your BP template standards, you have it open.
this one, template standards, yeah.
Yeah. So like for me, I will oftentimes have a tag where that's not just giving me the name of what, or that's not just text next to that hatch pattern. It's actually giving me a name. So you can't do it with tags, but like that's a tag for me. So I
Yeah,
tag my
yeah,
filled
okay, I see.
regions and I say grab the name.
I see what you're saying. So it's like yeah, that's the like the ultimate BIM goal. You don't have a single text in the entire project or template, right? So that would be a tag
Even
that
in
just
here
gives
like
you the name.
Legend, where this is just something for
Uh-huh.
me to be handy, but I
Yeah,
never
yeah.
used to. But then I started realizing with my clients, they're constantly renaming what I call the fill patterns, and so
Hmm.
I constantly was changing the text. Or let me be honest, for text. So by making those just a tag, because you can actually tag filled regions and legends, then I was actually
Sorry, you're cutting again, Brian.
yeah, I keep getting my pops up. Your internet's unstable. I don't know what's going on. My
Yeah,
download speeds are and upload speeds are fine. I don't know what's going on with Zoom. But yeah, so that's the thing for me is just, thinking not just for construction documents, but where else can we extract data, even in simple views like this?
yeah, yeah. Can you do it like with lines as well? I have a way
No,
to take
I
a line.
really
Yeah,
wish you could.
Some elements you cannot.
Yeah.
Someone in chat asked, can you use tags like these with legend components?
Unfortunately, no. So I don't do legends for actual modeled components. For me and my template, legends are only for like general notes, etc. Because you can't tag ironically, you can tag 2D components like detail are the filled regions, but you can't tag modeled objects. So for me, I actually model the objects. I think you do something similar, Nick. And then that modeled object is either on a phase or a design option or a work set that nobody sees, and that becomes my legend component. So therefore, I
Yeah,
can truly tag it.
yeah, legend components are not that good. I wish they would improve them a little bit, like just dimensioning and so on. I've used some detail items in legends that can work well. Do
Well,
you
and
do the
the other
phase thing with the legends?
I do. I have a phase at the very end of my project called my legend phase, the last phase in the project, so it doesn't automatically map to somebody when they link it in. And then I just make sure I'm never on that phase to see it, so I don't see the stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, I've never went that way. I can see the benefits, but I'm worried that people are going to be like, "What's this phase? I don't get it." So maybe with some advanced users, I could see it. Yeah, do you want to share it? I want to see it so people
Sure.
can know what we're
Sorry.
talking about.
I closed Revit in hopes that it would be better. Maybe it's a Revit 26 issue because I don't think it. No, I do Revit Radio on 26 and I don't have these issues.
Yeah, you do like monthly Zoom sessions. You don't lag, right?
No, I was in a Zoom freaking webinar yesterday and I didn't lag. So Sorry, I'm reopening Revit now. But yeah,
Uh,
so it is like you said, by having a weird face. Some of my clients like, no, 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 we put it on a design option, and then we make the primary design option empty, and then we have a secondary design option that has all of our legend components.
yeah, so that would be for people are wondering what we're talking about. That would be creating a new phase that's called whoops, I put it in the wrong spot. I'm always worried about adding phase in a project, but like you would call a phase called legend.
And I always do
And
it at the end,
mhm,
so you're never going to see it as something existing.
yeah.
So
Okay,
it's
so you,
my
you put it
last phase.
afterwards.
Yes, because that way, if
Ah,
I'm on a new
interesting.
construction, I won't see it as something existing.
Yeah. So did you ever have any issue where if you export the file, like these elements might show up in some sort of database or IFC or something? That's always something I'm worried about. Even though I know if you export IFC, it's like from 3D view typically.
Yeah, and it's going to export usually from the view you're in. So I
Uh-huh.
just don't have those elements turned on in that view.
So you do legend and then you create a new view that is called legend. Let's try it. Let's say that I remove this and you select. Oh yeah. So you just where do you model them super far away from the projects? How you deal with that?
I model it usually to the left, like left of the project insertion point.
Uh-huh.
Some of my clients will grab it and move it.
Yeah. So you model your walls, something like this, and then set it fine, and then you use this on a view for your legends, and that's better than legend components because you can kind of tag them and have all this stuff that you cannot do typically, right?
Right. And you can also apply the filters. So, like if you're
Hmm.
using a filter for code or for any other reason, now I can apply filters to this view. You can't apply filters to affect elements in an actual legend.
Can you do you demolish them or it's not necessary?
I don't. You technically could, so they become temporary objects. But again, if you're seeing the legend phase, then you're seeing a whole lot of other stuff anyway.
Hmm. Yeah, okay. So that your legend view would look something like this, and you tag them. Of course, you
Yep.
have real numbers, so
A-
that would be legend.
And even for things like use, like I know you have your doors, and most of my clients want a door legend of, hey, this is leaf type A, this is leaf
Uh-huh.
type B, etc. All of those things are going to be done in a legend too.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, my Revit's up. Let's see if I can do this without totally glitching out.
Let's see.
So this is my little like working view to see what's going on here, right? And I've got this set up. So all of this is in a legend phase. If I go back and say, hey, go back to new construction and turn on a filter to say, whatever, show all, that's all going to go away because as long as you have a phase filter, that stuff will disappear, right? Then you'll see I've got like a wall here and the wall has all of my doors. And then if I go into that view, here's all of those doors, and that view is going to be set up over here to say, hey, it's my legend view, and then I do a call out of each one of those or a dependent view of every single one of those, and that's how I do it. So if you're like, no, 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 I didn't want this to be called curtain wall one for that leaf type, and you rename it, the tag updates because this is a tag.
Hmm. So did you ever have issues with people not understanding the system and like modeling stuff in the legend phase? Like that's something I would be really worried about, but maybe it it's not a justified fear.
Yeah, no, I mean, it absolutely can. I mean, I have partial problems with legend components because like I can't do a legend component on my door leaf because if
Uh-huh.
your legend components are work plane based, they will
Yeah.
not let you choose which side you want to see. So I always
Okay.
see the edge of my doors.
Uh-huh.
There is, if you guys didn't know this, there is a Pi Revit tool for legends that will know say, no, 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 let me see the actual front and it will fix it for you, but in a
Really?
legend component. Yeah,
I don't know which one is that.
freaking know. I just know it's in here somewhere. I always have to find it.
Yeah, there's a lot of tools. I always get lost in these sub menus.
Yeah, it's not the wipe. No. There's up here somewhere, there's one for legend components that will
Hmm.
actually choose which one it is. And if anybody wants to throw it in the chat, feel free. Yeah, anyway, it's in there. So yeah, so I do that. But where this becomes nice for me is like if I actually go to a door, well, my sheet where all this is, so that same door that I placed is the leaf type, but it's also all my frame types. And then I do, so I have the capability to have all of that stuff done. Plan legends of the frames, elevation legends of the frames of the doors, etc. And again, they're all tagged. So if I was like, no, 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 I don't want to. If I look at this, this is a tag looking at the type mark. So if I was like, no, I wanted to change this from frame 4 to something else, oops, got tab select it. Um, I can grab that frame, go change the type mark. This needs to be, Homer Simpson. Now my tag in my legend is going to update. My schedule is going to update. Everything's updated.
So like in your template, you would include all of these, all the frames and the leaves, and people would delete what they don't need when they start the project.
Yeah, they can delete what they don't need. I put this all in there, but these are all just independent views. So if you're like, I'm not using this one and this one and this one, just delete the
Okay.
views and then move the view back.
So are you a subtractive template kind of guy or an additive template?
Yes, I'm in between.
In between. Okay. So to clarify what I'm asking, some like there are different school of thoughts with Revit template. Some of them it should be as small as possible, and then you use automations and tools like content catalog or Reveal or Kinship to load the content views whenever you need. Other schools of thought like you need a huge template, but when you start a project, you remove things away from it. But some people can be in between. You remove some stuff and you add. So you're in that vein.
I have majority of the wall types in there because have found people spend too much time trying to find wall types, or they just don't want to go find it, so they duplicate something and screw it up. I have a lot of commonly used doors, but not all of them. So yeah, I have like very little furniture and things like that. That's project specific. So
Yeah, Amy is saying we have too many project types to load everything into our template.
yeah, yeah. And I know there's a lot of subtractive. I worked with one client. They were an AEC firm. They did architecture engineering. Well, not C, well, maybe, but their template had something like 3,000 sheets in it, because they were
Yeah.
like, no, it's one template, has everything. But then again, and this is before Dynamo, we had a lot of schedules and a lot of things set up to where, hey, you go to the schedule, you hit delete, all the views go away, all the sheets go away, and you could spend a couple minutes removing that type of stuff. But yeah, if
Yeah.
you do everything from residential to hospitals, you don't want to put lead line walls in your template because you're not
No,
going to use
yeah.
those in your residential.
No, for sure. Yeah, I'm a big believer in like project startup automation phase. Like either you through a custom plugin or Dynamo routines, but like you start a project, if it's residential, there's a series of steps to get it ready for residential projects. But
Yeah.
I don't know what you think about it, but have separate templates for residential, another one for healthcare. I don't know. What do you
If my
think?
clients do that, I agree, but it does become a pain because then somebody's like, oh, cool, we want to change all the fonts to be Calibre, and now you're changing in 5 different templates. Oh, we
Yeah,
want to change
exactly.
the dimension types. We want to get rid of the tick mark to an arrowhead, whatever. Now you're doing it in 5 templates. So there's always a fine line of, okay, that's great, but just understand that when you make a change, there's time involved in that.
Yeah, I mean, here in Canada, we work with metric and imperial. There was a time we tried to maintain one metric and one imperial template, but it always ended up one of them was up to date and not the other one. So we had to tell users, oh, I know you want to do an imperial project, but use the metric one and just change the unit because imperial is out of date. So I realized multiple templates, unless you're really up to speed and you have a team really dedicated to it, it can be a recipe for pain.
Well, and metric to imperial is even worse because, okay, is that a 2 foot by 4 foot ceiling tile? Or is that 600 by 300 ceiling tile? Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because they don't transition. So you end up, if you try to do it all in one template, you end up having soft metric or soft inches.
We're working on that, like the Bin Pure plugin, which is still in beta, but it has a tool where it rounds up unit to specific values. So like half of an inch would translate to 12 millimeters instead of 12 point something.
Right, but that doesn't change your hatch patterns.
No, yeah, it's not perfect. It's not
Yeah.
perfect.
No, no, because well, and you're in Canada, which is even worse because when you deal with wood, it's imperial units. But
Hmm.
if you're dealing with metal on the same project, that's going to be in metric. So it's really weird because I had a structural engineer who's like, no, it's all 2x4s, but we're still
Yeah.
using 6M bars. It's like, oh my God, that's so weird.
Someone is asking about your Revit tabs coloring.
Yeah, so my
Uh,
Revit
t-
tabs, I don't use PyRevit. If you have to actually go look at PyRevit and you go into their settings on it, it does actually say thanks to Parallax.
Yeah, you
So
use
when
the
you come down
parallax
here,
one.
it says thanks to Parallax. It says it somewhere in here. I don't remember. But yeah, so their UI, it doesn't have as many options. I use the one from Parallax, which is under my add-ins. It's called Neat UI. So it'll let me to have one tab bigger or smaller. It allows me to also then obviously change the colors, but I can change the active tab size, etc. It's got tab squishing, so I can make the tabs all go short if I want to and be consistent. And you can also then see it's coloring it off over here as well. So there's just a whole bunch of different options it has. I like it a little better.
Uh, your sounds better. You're not cutting off. Someone asked is if we add in. I don't think so. I don't think it's super expensive,
No,
but
no, it's not
check it
free. You do
out.
have to pay for it. I
Mm.
don't remember what I paid for it, but yeah, you have to pay for it.
So I think we could return to keynote tags and symbols. So what we've concluded so far, tags, it's your preferred option for detailing. And when it comes more to plan views, symbols can work, but you prefer keynotes, but you wouldn't use tags. So can you do kind of recap for all kind of views, what system you would recommend?
Yeah, so and again, it can be either way. I always just like to tell people, that was really weird. I like to tell people, do it the way you want to do it, right? So if you're talking a floor plan, and I tried opening up 25 instead of 26 to see maybe if it's a 26 Revit issue. I have no idea. But if I come down to like a floor plan, and I did want to do some like sheet notes, like Nick was showing earlier, I have a keynote and I have a symbol version of this. So I have one in here called keyed. I have a family called keyed notation, and I can still do this as a keynote. So if I go to my annotate, and I go to keynote, and I'm going to use a user keynote, I can pick over here and choose this little thing. Cool. No keynote file loaded here. So let me go point this to the keynote file. Annotate, keynote settings, browse. To my keynote standard. I don't know why this got lost. There we go.
Maybe it's keynotes that are glitching you and your sound.
Very well could be.
Let's blame keynotes.
Let's blame keynotes. Well, I'm in 25, so we'll see. So here's where I was talking about before too. So like if you're doing planned notes, I just start coming down here and have different like values similar to regular keynotes like through specs. I just happen to say that, hey, all 200s are plan notes, all 300s are like elevation notes, or however you want to categorize it. You could leave them all as 100s too. It doesn't really matter. But I just have these down here as generic notes, right? So now I can come in here and do just like what Nick was doing. Sweet. Need to edit the size of my tag. Let's just go make that 4/16. Make it a little bigger to fit. So that's how I can do this. And this truly is a keynote value. So similar to what we actually said, I want an arrowhead. Similar to what we said on this, I do have to pick something. But if that end is set up to be a free end in your properties, you could move it to be whatever. But if I do move the wall, yes, I know. If I do move this wall, you're seeing that, okay, I'm having issues with that. Should have turned that off. You'll see that the tag is moving up and down with the object I tagged. So that is one thing, as Nick said, if I hide the wall, the tag is going to go away too, right? Because that's the element I tagged. So if you are doing this, you do have to pay a little bit more attention to that keynote, that user keynote of what you're picking. Like Nick said, if I turn my grab by face, if there was a floor modeled, I could grab the floor. If there's not, then I can't point it to nothing. So just be careful of that if you are doing this. Now, like we said, it's got a keynote number, and the text value is going to just be coming from that TXT file. Some of my clients like it, as Nick said too, because now I can be in 5 buildings and be consistent between my note 200, my note 100, my whatever else I want to do there. Or just like Nick said, can go into my symbol, and I don't know if I have it loaded in here. I'm gonna go just load one in. Symbol. Keyed notation, loaded in here. So I do have a symbol in here. Probably doesn't match because again, I don't use this too much. But now this is going to be just a symbol, right? I can come back and say, cool, add a leader after the fact. I can put that pointing. Mine is slightly different than, cool, that says diamond, but it's got the circle. Something's going on here. But where mine is slightly different than Nick's, his are all instance based. I usually like to come in here and like say, okay, let me duplicate this and call this my. You can put the demo something, what there. Again, my number is going to be 1 and my value is demo this stuff.
So you have, so if you have 50 nodes, it's 50 types of this family.
I do. Yep. But again, for me, I rely on this then being a little bit more consistent. Like you said, you could do it instance based. Whenever I found it to be instance based and there's like 5 users on a project, every single person does it. They spell it wrong and nobody ever checks the schedule. They print and all of a sudden their schedule has 15 fives. And they're like, why are there 15 fives here?
So if a client comes to you and asks, what is the best technique to annotate or plan views? So would you use symbols or keynotes? Are you going to tell them keynotes?
I show them both and let them decide.
Yeah.
Because
Interesting.
again, I have some clients who love the keynoting because they will put that keynote file on a folder on the server that only 1 or 2 people have rights to. So you're not allowed
Yeah.
to add keynotes as an everyday user. You have to get it approved by your technical architect to say, yes, that's a keynote we can do. No, that's not how we do things, etc. So some of them like it for that locking down purpose as well.
So would you say that maybe small to medium firms would prefer symbols because it's a bit easier to modify, while maybe larger firms, they want more control, more consistency among projects, so keynotes would be better?
Yeah, that's usually how it ends up being, yes. Usually it's like, okay, we want to lock this down a little bit more. We're using keynotes. And again, my tag is called keyed notation. It's still
Oh
keynote
yeah.
tag. I just call it keyed notation to differentiate between a keynote tag, right? Because I can still go do my um, element keynote and you'll see I actually don't have a keynote tag loaded in this old template. So yeah, but I have both types of tags inside of there. The other thing that is big for me that I always do, but I think yours was the same. If it's a generic symbol or GA for generic annotation versus tag, letting users know this is smart, this is not.
I mean, I've seen people place a circle with a text and group
Yes.
it. So it's dumb, but it's not the dumbest. Let's put it this way.
Yep. Yep. If I ever saw somebody doing something like that, I would be like, yeah, you need to know. No, 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 that doesn't work. We don't allow that to happen. Funny. I got those ones called them different. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the thing for me. I do have different symbols because I have a lot of clients like, hey, for plan notes, we want circles. For elevation notes, we want hexagons, whatever. So
Yeah.
those families usually do just have visibility graphics to turn on whatever you want. I did not in this one even include the text afterwards because 90% of the time, I don't want you to have the text in there. I
Yeah.
want it just to be a symbol so you know it's a symbol.
Yeah. Yeah. I gotcha. All right. I'll ask the chat. What system do you currently use? The dumb text, symbols, or keynotes? I'm just curious to see what people are going to say. Okay. Al, so far we covered details and plan views. What about other view types? Do you prefer different techniques for like elevations or general sections?
No, if you're going to do it, keep it consistent is always what I say. Right. And again, these are kind of more specific sheet notes that or plan notes you're going to want, or elevation notes. If you still have your overall general notes of like, hey, dimensions are always to face of stud, blah, 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 blah. Those are still going to be, in my mind, a legend that you put on there.
Hmm.
An additional thing that's going, regardless either of those, it's going to be a schedule I put onto the sheet.
Yeah, yeah. It's a real schedule and not kind of a dumb legend where you manually try to match it AutoCAD
Yeah.
style. Yeah, like interesting to see. A lot of people use keynotes for plan views. Someone says symbols for plan notes, text for detailed views. Keynotes
Yeah.
for plan notes, dummy text for details. So it's kind of all over the place. That's consistent.
Yep.
That things are
That
inconsistent.
that's what I have always found is it's kind of just like people, it's every firm. So I don't ever try to dictate to somebody and say what's better
Hmm.
and what's not until we actually get to like the detailing. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. If you're detailing, that detail should have been tagged. 100%. I will
Yeah.
always say that about detailing. Now, again, I have not sold a single structural engineer on that.
Really? They prefer
They're like,
keynotes
I
or
want a novel. No, they want a novel.
text?
They want to draw the
Oh,
detail and
yeah.
they
Yeah.
agree with
Okay.
all detail components and no lines. But they're like, no, 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 no. I want to say this is a wood stud wall with 16 inch, stud 16 inches with pressure treated sill plate, blah, blah, blah. And they just want to do one novel next to it and there's no call outs. So,
Tyler in the chat says we use keynotes, but they are all blank in the keynote template file. User copy the text file to their project and make it unique. So it's
yeah.
keynotes, but like each project has its own file.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing too. So a lot of my clients, they have a Keynote file, but that does get copied to every project because every project, even if you're doing CSI values, is going to have slight variations, right? So like the one that I have here, actually, one of my clients was nice enough to give me, it has all of the crazy, values you saw inside of there. But each project's going to be like, oh, we tweaked the concrete to be something different, or we tweaked the masonry to say our specific type of masonry. So I absolutely agree. If you're keynoting, that file should get copied to your project folder and use it there. And then especially in a scenario like this one where you're just doing the 100, 200, 300 notes, yeah, those are all just specific to each project.
Yeah. Let's see. It's funny to read the answers that everyone has a mix of different systems. Someone saying I'm transitioning to keynotes right now. I have a mix of tags, multi-category tags, keynotes, and text. I feel that's like the typical. And in fact, I got to admit, like in elevation, I do like material tags, like to show, okay, this is a brick, this is glass, this is metal siding number XYZ. It makes sense, like to tag the material, but it's kind of yet again another technique to do so. What do you say about elevations if you want to show materials?
Usually I have a lot of my firms transition. Like at the beginning, they're just throwing in some generic wall and then they're going to put a note that says blah 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 material, and it's not refined. And then once they start refining it, they delete it. But yeah, I believe that you should be tagging materials. And just as an example, you still can also even keynote the materials. So if
Yeah.
you were like, I wanted to tag every layer of this wall, and you're kind of like, but how do I do that? Because a wall only has one keynote value. So if you're keynoting for like, cool, I can say this is a wall, but I want to get in and tag the gypsum board and everything else. You can go to Keynote and do a material keynote, and then you can grab this layer. Not user, sorry. I wanted that to be element. No, I did materials. That's correct. I just probably don't have a keynote set up to that. So you can grab every single one of those layers. That just means in your materials, you've got to be diligent to set up every single one of those materials to have a keynote. So
Yeah.
you've got to come down here and click the keynote in the material dialog to say, cool, that's going to be my Division 7 finishes. This is going to be whatever.
Yeah, so we have good questions about it. Amy is asking, how does your paint tag work that you have on that example? Do
I
you use like
oh
for paint, different paint colors, or would you use it? Material tag, keynote, material keynote,
I do room tags.
room tags?
So for me, when I select a room, I've got all of these materials inside of here, the main color, up
Wow,
to
that's
10
a lot of
accent,
parameters.
up to 10. Well, it used to be like one or two or three, and the client's like, no, I need 10 accent colors. So you'll see I've got
Hmm.
the main color and then up to 10 accent colors. And these are um, shared parameters associated to rooms that are literally materials. So that way I can go into the room and start deciding what those materials are. And then I have a tag that says, cool, I'm looking for the main material or one of those accent materials. And then my room is calling out and holding the data for all of that. So here you can see I've got a tag that shows all of them as well. And if I go into this room like, oh, no, 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 that wall accent should have been um, quartz. Cool. We're going to put quartz in there. As I change the quartz to be wall accent 2, if this tag was pointing to wall accent, then it's going to pick up as well.
Okay,
So it's
so
pseudo smart, I like to call it. It's all
uh,
pointing to the room data, but it's not going to ever know what I modeled in this case.
yeah, and why not like a material tag? Because
Because I'm
could
not going to
be,
go in and paint all the different walls.
yeah. And what happened if you use the paint tool with material tag? Does it work on the thickness of the material or it's just the surface?
It would work in an elevation. You would never be able to tag that in plan.
That's a problem, right? If you use the paint,
Yep.
like you really want to have the different paint colors, it's not really going to work in the plan views unless you actually have wall composition, but that would be kind of crazy.
Yeah. And you would have to, I'm not a big fan of the paint tool because then you have to split the wall here. Then somebody
Hmm.
does something to the wall and the split moves. And now you've got half of it painted and not the other half.
Yeah.
Not a big fan of the paint tool. So I have clients who literally go model a 32nd inch thick wall, and they model all the finishes. They're like, well, if it's a tile wall, we model the tile wall. So yeah, but in your case, like in an elevation or whatever else we're looking for me, when we're doing that, if I've modeled the object, I absolutely do a material tag. It's either a material keynote tag, if that's how you work, or a material tag that's pointing to the material mark or name or something.
Yeah. So what about like exterior elevation? How do you would you annotate these?
I still do, like you said, a material tag because as
Material
I'm
tag.
modeling those exterior elevations, I'm getting the material set up inside of there. So absolutely. The only and even like if I'm talking like curtain wall panels, I still tag the glazing, right? My material's got
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
value inside of there. And I
Hmm.
think that's one of the big things for me. And I know your doors do this, Nick. Like anything I create is always going to not use these stupid out of the box parameters that
Hmm.
allow you to type in anything you want,
Hmm.
right? I
Yeah.
hate the out of the box parameters we can't get rid of because I don't
Yeah.
want somebody to type in a material that doesn't exist. Or,
Yeah.
we type P-1. I don't want somebody going P periods. And I don't want that to be something somebody types in. Everything, even including these parameters for the room, take you to the material data. You can't fake it in. You've got to select a material. So that's my other big thing when you're talking material tagging is it should always go to an element or
Hmm.
material dialogue. It should never be a dumb text value.
So what are the benefits of using keynotes for materials over material tag? It's pretty
Honest
similar.
truth, the only advantage of doing Keynote for a material is if you have a layered assembly, you can actually tag each individual layer.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So I have one client who does that. Their wall tags, they do all this, and they're like, "Well, we do it in keynoting." So the downside to that is in your materials dialog box. Again, if I go start looking at just the gypsum board, I can't just have like gypsum one, gypsum two, right? Because that keynote is probably going to be having the value to it for the thickness, right? So if I come down here to finishes, thought I clicked on it. I guess I could have just done it over there. But if I come down here to finishes and I open up finishes and I go to my gypsum board, that means I have to have a 5/8 thick material, a half-inch material, a type X material. I have to have a gypsum board that's 15 different gypsum board materials
Yeah, that
assigned to the
yeah.
appropriate wall.
Yeah,
And then when
I
somebody comes in and says, "Oh, that's cool, but let me go ahead."
yeah, I was saying that I see some firms that have
So when somebody,
materials for like a gypsum 19 millimeters and a gypsum 3/4 of an inch,
yep.
and like that's a bit crazy. It's like that's not how things should be,
I mean,
just to have
if
that
you're
legend.
keynoting and you want to put the size in, that's what you have to do. But then you
Yeah.
have to worry that if somebody changes the size, they also have to remember to change the material as well, or vice
Mm.
versa. I've seen people go to change the material and forget to change the thickness. So
Yeah, but potentially that's a lot of materials
yeah, it
in
absolutely is.
yeah. All right, we are almost
I
at
have one client who's done that over the 20 years of me doing this, and I'm like,
yeah.
cool, you go to town.
Yeah.
Um, I don't want 9 different gypsum layers materials.
All right, so we're about in the 90-minute marks. If you have some final question, it's time to ask in the chat. So we had kind of an overview of the different node system. So my understanding, detail item tags for details. Then for plan view and other views, it can be a mix. It depends on what you prefer. Just don't use dumb text. Symbols and keynotes can work. What are we going to talk about next week?
So I want to get into a little bit more about the generic annotations and the keynoting and creating the schedules for them.
Hmm.
And
So the
then
scheduling part.
Yeah, the scheduling part of it to get all of this, right? I briefly showed you even the detail item tags because again, I always like to talk about those schedules, but then also how to use a generic annotation family to create a dumb table. I'm not a big fan of it, but I want to talk about that versus using the title value in a schedule as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and also I'm sure that you have some internal schedule for like QA, QC and sheet schedule, and these would be different, right?
Exactly.
Uh, have you ever worked on multilingual projects where you need a description for the same element in
So
multiple
yes, I
languages?
have, and that 100% of the time I say use keynoting because
Really?
I
Yeah.
have, yeah, because you can out for one that's in English and one that's in Spanish or French out and point it to a different keynote file. So yeah,
Oh, yeah.
and I have had it was actually Canadian clients like, hey, we need it half the time in French and half the time in English note file, and they would point it
Yeah,
down
yeah.
is if you've like dimensioned and you override the dimension, you're like, oh, I want this to say max, right? So I click on the text and below say max. Well, that's not what it is in French.
I've seen some prefab housing firm here that have plans both in English and French. Sometimes the same project they need to switch. And actually, all of their families are bilingual. And for their detail item tags, they have detail items have a French description, English description. And so they have a script that switch everything to English now. And it's just kind of switched the tag to show the English versions instead of the French and so on. It's pretty impressive, but it's a lot of time to set it up. But
Yeah, I'm currently working
it's
with a
doable.
client that wants it in English and Spanish because they're like all the contractors in Southern California speak
Yeah.
Spanish.
Hmm.
So what we are, and I've done this with another firm in the past, so we actually are setting up a global parameter for them. And
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's smart.
all of their tags, there's the text for English versus Spanish. And then we have a global parameter that we associate that text to. So in the global parameter, they can just go up and say, okay, cool. And then it turns off all of the or Spanish version, or I want it to. So they can make that global change with a parameter as opposed to selecting all the tags and trying to swap out the tags.
All right. Good. So that's going to be it for today. Let me just stop the recording.